Commander HFY stood before the massive display screen on the bridge of the Nexus blade. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the blue light from the tactical readouts as he studied the data. 3,000 years of galactic dominance had taught the Kalari one thing above all others. They were superior. Their energy weapons could slice through any armor. Their crystalline bodies could survive in the vacuum of space. Their technology was beyond anything most species could even understand. Today, however, he was looking at something new, something that made his mandibles click with amusement. "Humans," he said to his aide, Sub-Commander Krelnox. "Look at these readings." The data showed a species that seemed almost comically weak. No natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities. They couldn't even breathe in space without bulky suits. Their weapons fired small metal projectiles using chemical explosions. Their ships were made of welded metal plates and held together with bolts. "They call their homeworld Earth," Krelnox reported, his voice carrying the same amused tone. "It's a small blue planet in a system with only one star. Their entire civilization exists on just this one world." HFY's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "One world? How many of them are there?" "Approximately 8 billion individuals, Commander. 8 billion beings on one small planet." HFY's exoskeleton shifted color to pale green, the Kalari equivalent of laughter. "They must be packed together like grubs in a hive. No wonder they seem so weak. They've never faced real challenges." The Kalari Confederation controlled over 300 star systems. Each Kalari world had vast cities of crystal and energy, with populations carefully managed to maintain optimal living conditions. The idea of billions of beings crammed onto one tiny planet was both amusing and slightly disgusting. "The War Council has decided to offer them an alliance," Krelnox continued. "They wish to use human auxiliary forces in our campaign against the hive swarms." HFY nodded approvingly. The hive swarms were the Confederation's current enemy, a race of biomechanical creatures that consumed entire planets. They were dangerous but predictable. Their tactics never changed. Their technology was purely biological. The Kalari had been slowly pushing them back for decades. "Auxiliary forces," HFY repeated. "Yes, I can see the logic. Even weak troops can serve as a distraction while our real warriors strike at the enemy's heart. When do they arrive?" "Their advance unit should dock within the hour, Commander. You've been assigned to oversee their integration into our forces." HFY's exoskeleton shifted to a confident blue. This would be simple work. He had trained dozens of alien auxiliaries over the centuries. Most species required extensive conditioning to fight alongside Kalari forces. They had to learn to follow precise battle plans, to use energy-based weapons, to coordinate with Kalari tactical systems. An hour later, HFY stood in the main docking bay as the human transport ship approached. The vessel looked exactly as primitive as the data had suggested. It was a long metal cylinder with engines attached to one end and a blunt nose at the other. There were no elegant curves, no crystalline enhancements, no visible energy projectors. It looked like something a child might build from scrap metal. The ship docked with a series of mechanical clanks that made HFY wince. Kalari ships connected through harmonic energy fields that created perfect seals without physical contact. This grinding mechanical approach seemed crude beyond belief. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere. The first human to emerge was a male wearing what appeared to be their military uniform, a simple cloth and synthetic material outfit in mottled green and brown colors. He was small, barely reaching HFY's shoulder, and his skin looked soft and vulnerable. "Commander HFY?" the human said in surprisingly clear galactic standard. "I'm Captain Lee Do-Yun, commanding the 47th Expeditionary Unit." HFY looked down at the small creature. Do-Yun had dark hair and eyes, and his face was remarkably calm for someone meeting an alien species for the first time. Behind him, more humans filed out of the transport. They were all small, soft-looking, and carried primitive kinetic weapons. "Captain Do-Hyun," HFY replied, his voice translator converting his harmonic speech into human audible words. "Welcome aboard the Nexus Blade. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Comfortable enough, Commander. Thank you for accepting our forces into your fleet." A female human stepped forward. She was even smaller than Do-hyun, with short black hair and alert eyes. "Lieutenant Park Soo-jin, second in command," she said with a crisp nod. Vex-Thai studied both humans carefully. There was something in their manner that didn't match their apparent physical weakness. They showed no signs of intimidation, despite being surrounded by beings twice their size wearing what amounted to natural armor. Their eyes moved constantly, taking in details of the docking bay, the positions of Kalari crew members, the locations of exits and equipment. "We've prepared quarters for your unit," Vex-Thai said. "Tomorrow we'll begin integration training. You'll need to learn to coordinate with Kalari tactical systems and adapt to our combat methods." "We look forward to the training, Commander," Do-hyun replied. "We're eager to learn from your experience." As the humans were escorted to their quarters, Vex-Thai noticed something that troubled him slightly. While most alien auxiliaries showed obvious signs of stress when first encountering Kalari technology and military power, the humans seemed merely curious. They asked practical questions about ship systems, gravity generation, and life support. They showed no awe at the crystal corridors or energy displays that usually left other species speechless. Later that evening, Vex-Thai reviewed the human files in his quarters. The data was sparse but revealing. Humans had developed space travel, remarkably quickly for such a primitive species. They had gone from first flight to interstellar travel in less than a century. Their military organization seemed efficient, despite using such basic equipment. One detail caught his attention. The humans had provided no information about their homeworld's military history. When asked about their combat experience, they had simply stated that they had adequate training and experience in warfare. Vex-Thai made a note to investigate this further, though he doubted it would matter much. How dangerous could the military history of a single-planet species possibly be? Outside his quarters, human voices carried through the corridors as the new auxiliaries settled in. They spoke quietly among themselves in their own language, occasionally laughing at some private joke. They sounded relaxed, comfortable, almost like they belonged here. For reasons he couldn't explain, that bothered Vex-Thai more than anything else. The training exercises did not go as Vex-Thai expected. For 3 days, he watched the humans attempt to integrate with standard Kalari battle formations. They moved wrong. When ordered to advance in formation, they spread out and used cover that wasn't part of the tactical plan. When told to hold position, they repositioned themselves based on terrain features that Kalari doctrine considered irrelevant. "Sergeant Kim Jae-woo," Vex-Thai called out during one exercise. The human had left his assigned position to take cover behind a metal barrier. "You were ordered to maintain position at grid reference 7 Alpha. Kim Jae-woo, a stocky human with observant eyes, looked up from where he was kneeling. "Yes, Commander. But from 7 Alpha, I can't see the approach route the mock enemies are using. From here, I can cover both Lieutenant Park's position and provide overwatch for the flanking team. The tactical computer has calculated optimal firing positions for all units," Vex-Thai explained patiently. "Individual initiative disrupts the coordination matrix." "Understood, Commander. But what if the tactical computer is wrong?" The question stopped Vex-Thai cold. In 3 millennia of Kalari warfare, their tactical computers had never been wrong. They calculated millions of variables in real time, accounting for enemy positions, terrain features, weapon effectiveness, and unit capabilities. The idea that an individual soldier might see something the computer missed was absurd. "The computer is not wrong, Sergeant," Vex-Thai said firmly. Kim Jae-woo nodded respectfully. "Of course, Commander. I'll return to position." But as the exercise continued, Vex-Thai noticed that the humans kept making the same kinds of mistakes. They ignored computer-generated tactical solutions in favor of their own observations. They used their primitive weapons in ways that weren't part of any known combat doctrine. Most disturbing of all, their unconventional methods often worked better than the proper Kalari approaches. During weapons training, the problems became even more obvious. Kalari energy weapons required precise targeting systems and steady firing platforms. The humans couldn't seem to grasp the concept of letting the weapon's computer do most of the work. Private Yang Hyunwoo, a young human with quick reflexes, kept manually adjusting his weapon's targeting system. "Commander, this computer keeps trying to aim for center mass, but that's not always the best target. Center mass provides the highest probability of incapacitation," Vexthai explained. "Against most targets, yes, sir. But sometimes you need to aim for joints or weapon systems or support structures. Depends on what you're fighting and what you're trying to accomplish." Vexthai's exoskeleton shifted to a frustrated orange color. "Private, the weapons computer contains tactical data on every known hostile species in the galaxy. It will select the optimal target automatically." Yang Hyunwoo looked puzzled. "But what about unknown hostile species? Or known species using new equipment? Or situations where you don't want to kill the target, just disable it? Or when you need to cause maximum psychological impact versus maximum physical damage?" The questions revealed a way of thinking about combat that Vexthai found deeply uncomfortable. Kalari warfare was precise, predictable, and calculated. Every variable was accounted for. Every scenario had been analyzed. The humans seemed to assume that any system could fail, any plan could become obsolete, and any weapon might need to be used in ways it wasn't designed for. The real shock came during the first combat simulation. The scenario was simple: a standard hive swarm assault on a fortified position. The Kalari had run this simulation thousands of times. The optimal strategy was well established. Energy barriers would channel the hive creatures into kill zones, where coordinated plasma fire would eliminate them efficiently. The humans were assigned to a secondary position, providing support while Kalari forces handled the main assault. It should have been routine. The simulation began normally. Hive bioships approached the defensive position, releasing waves of warrior forms that charged across open ground. Kalari energy barriers activated, creating the predicted funnel effect. Plasma cannons charged up for coordinated volleys. Then, the simulation added a complication: a hive breacher, one of their larger assault forms designed to break through fortified positions. This wasn't unusual. The tactical computer immediately adjusted the defensive plan to account for the new threat. But something went wrong. The breacher's bioacid proved more effective than predicted, dissolving through the energy barriers faster than anticipated. Suddenly, hive warriors were pouring through gaps in the defensive line. Vexthai watched in horror as his carefully planned defense began to collapse. Kalari soldiers fell back in good order, but the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. In a real battle, this would mean calling for orbital bombardment and accepting heavy casualties. That's when the humans did something incomprehensible. Instead of retreating with the Kalari forces, Sergeant Kim Jae-woo and Corporal Choi Min-ji grabbed demolition charges and ran directly toward the breacher, not away from the overwhelming threat but toward it. "What are they doing?" Vexthai demanded. Captain Lee Do-yeon, standing calmly beside him, watched his soldiers charge into certain death. "Improvising, Commander. They'll be killed." "Probably," Do-yeon agreed. "But the breacher will be damaged or destroyed, which will give your forces time to re-establish the defensive line." Vexthai watched in stunned silence as the two humans reached the massive hive creature. The simulation showed them taking massive damage from bioacid sprays and claw attacks, but they kept moving. Kim Jae-woo managed to attach his demolition charge to the creature's underbelly before being struck down. Choi Min-ji, already wounded, detonated both charges manually. The explosion destroyed the breacher and sealed the gap in the defensive line. The simulation registered a tactical victory, but two humans had died to achieve it. They weren't ordered to make that attack, Vexthai said, his voice hollow. "No, sir," Lieutenant Park Soo-jin replied. "But they saw what needed to be done. The tactical computer would have found another solution, a better solution. Maybe, Commander, but not fast enough." That evening, Vexthai called up the after-action reports from the simulation. The computer analysis confirmed that the humans' improvised attack had been highly effective, but also noted that it fell completely outside standard tactical doctrine. There had been no orders given, no coordination with other units, no consideration of unit preservation or casualty minimization. The humans had simply seen a problem and solved it in the most direct way possible, regardless of personal cost. Vexthai found himself staring at the tactical display long into the night, trying to understand what he had witnessed. The Kalari way of war was elegant, efficient, and above all predictable. Every action served a calculated purpose. Every soldier's life was preserved whenever possible. Every victory was achieved through superior technology and careful planning. What the humans had done was none of those things. It was crude, wasteful, and tactically unsound. It had also worked better than anything in the Kalari tactical database. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexthai found himself wondering if there might be more than one way to win a war. After the simulation, Vexthai couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. That night, he requested a private meeting with Captain Lee Do-Yun. They met in one of the observation lounges, where the stars streamed past outside the transparent aluminum windows. "Captain," Vexthai began, "I need to understand something about your species' approach to warfare." Do-Hyun sat across from him, looking perfectly relaxed despite being alone with a being who could crush him without effort. "What would you like to know, Commander?" "In today's simulation, 2 of your soldiers died to achieve an objective that our tactical computers could have eventually solved through other means. Why did they make that choice?" "Because it was the right thing to do at that moment," Do-Hyun replied simply. "But they weren't ordered to attack. They had no guarantee of success. They threw away their lives for a marginal tactical advantage." Do-Hyun was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "Commander, may I ask you something? How long has your species been the dominant military force in this region?" "Approximately 3,000 standard years," Vexthai answered proudly. "And in all that time, how many times has your homeworld been invaded?" The question caught Vexthai off guard. "Never. Our defenses are impregnable." "How many times has your civilization faced extinction?" "Never. We are too advanced, too powerful." Do-Hyun nodded slowly. "That explains the difference between us, Commander. Humans have been fighting for survival since we first stood upright. We've faced extinction more times than we can count. Ice, ages that lasted thousands of years, plagues that killed half our population, wars that turned entire continents into graveyards." Vexthai's exoskeleton shifted to a confused yellow color. "But you survived." "We survived because we learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save anything. My soldiers understood that if the breacher had continued its assault, many more would have died. They made a choice to trade their lives for others. It's what humans do." "It's irrational," Vexthai protested. "Is it?" Do-Hyun asked. "Let me tell you about Earth, Commander. Our planet has tried to kill us since the day we evolved. We survived ice ages by learning to make fire and shelter from nothing. We survived predators that could tear us apart with their claws by learning to work together and make weapons from sticks and stones. We survived diseases by caring for the sick even when it meant risking infection ourselves." He paused, looking directly at Vexthai with those unsettling human eyes. "We didn't survive because we were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. We survived because when everything went wrong, when all the plans failed, when death was certain, we kept fighting anyway. We learned that survival isn't about having the best weapons or the perfect strategy. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes, no matter what it costs." That night, Vexthai couldn't sleep. He accessed the ship's database and began researching human history. What he found disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. Humans had indeed faced extinction repeatedly. The data showed multiple climate disasters, several supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and planetary-scale ice ages. Any one of these events should have wiped out a developing species. Yet humans had not only survived, but had thrived. Their military history was even more troubling. They had fought constantly, not just against external threats, but against each other. The database contained records of conflicts that had consumed entire civilizations, wars that lasted decades, battles where hundreds of thousands had died in single days. Most disturbing of all were the weapons they had developed. Nuclear weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Chemical weapons that could kill millions. Biological weapons that could spread across continents. They had created the means to destroy their own planet multiple times over, and yet they had never used these weapons to actually end their species. They had come close several times, but had always stepped back from the brink. Not because they couldn't destroy themselves, but because they chose not to. The next day, Vexthai sought out Lieutenant Park Sujin during her off-duty hours. He found her in the recreation area, helping some of her soldiers maintain their equipment. "Lieutenant, may I speak with you privately?" Sujin looked up from the weapon she was cleaning. "Of course, Commander." She handed the weapon to Private Yang Hyun-woo and followed Vexthai to a quiet corner. "I've been studying your species' history," Vexthai began. "I don't understand how you survived as a civilization. Your planet seems to have been continuously hostile, and your people have spent most of their history fighting each other." Sujin smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Vexthai's exoskeleton prickle with unease. "What specifically confuses you, Commander?" "Your weapons development. You created devices capable of ending your entire civilization, yet you still exist." "How?" "We learned restraint," Sujin replied. "But not the kind you might think. We didn't learn to avoid violence. We learned to control it. We learned when to fight and when to stop fighting. We learned the difference between winning a battle and surviving a war. I don't understand the distinction." Sujin was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Commander, your species has been dominant for 3,000 years. You've won every major conflict through superior technology and careful planning. You've never had to make the hard choices." "What hard choices?" "Whether to sacrifice a city to save a nation. Whether to poison your own land to deny it to an enemy. Whether to keep fighting when you know you can't win, just to make the cost too high for your enemy to bear." Vexthai felt his exoskeleton grow cold. "You would do such things?" "We have done such things, Commander. Many times. We learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to prove that defeating you will cost more than leaving you alone." That evening, Vexthai stood alone in his quarters, staring at a tactical display that showed the human contingent's positions throughout the ship. They were scattered among the Kalari crew, integrated into normal operations, helping with maintenance and daily tasks. They looked harmless, almost fragile. But now he saw them differently. Each human carried within them the genetic and cultural memory of a species that had faced extinction and refused to die. They weren't just soldiers. They were the descendants of survivors who had looked into the abyss of annihilation and decided to stare back. For the first time in his 3-century military career, Commander Vexthai began to understand the difference between being undefeated and being undefeatable. The Kalari had never lost because they had never faced an enemy willing to pay any price for victory. The humans were different. They came from a world where the price of defeat was extinction, and they had learned to pay any cost necessary to avoid that fate. As he prepared for sleep, one thought kept echoing in his mind. What would happen if these creatures ever turned their patient, calculating willingness to embrace destruction against the Kalari Confederation? He decided it was a question he never wanted to answer. 3 weeks later, the real war arrived. Vexthai was reviewing supply reports when the proximity alarms began screaming throughout the Nexus blade. He rushed to the bridge to find chaos. The main display showed dozens of massive bioships dropping out of hyperspace. Not the small Hive scouting forces they had been fighting, but the actual Hive fleet that had devoured 17 star systems. "Contact analysis," he barked to his sensor operator. 47 primary Hive ships, Commander. Estimated total biomass, 3 billion combat forms. This is the main fleet." Vexthai's exoskeleton went white with shock. 3 billion. The entire Kalari force in this sector numbered fewer than 2 million soldiers. Even with their technological superiority, the numbers were overwhelming. "Communications, signal the fleet. Implement defensive formation Theta 7. All ships are to—" "Commander," his tactical officer interrupted. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human contingent. Captain Lee Do-yun requests immediate conference with Fleet Command. Under normal circumstances, Vexithai would have dismissed the request. Auxiliaries didn't participate in strategic planning. But something in the tactical officer's voice made him pause. Put him through. Do-hyun's face appeared on the communications screen. Behind him, Vexithai could see the human quarters, but they had been transformed. Equipment had been moved around, and humans were working frantically on devices Vexithai didn't recognize. "Commander," Do-hyun said without preamble, "we need to talk. My people have been analyzing the Hive fleet composition, and we have some observations." "Captain, this is not the time for—" "Commander," Do-hyun interrupted, his voice carrying a weight that made Vexithai stop mid-sentence. "With respect, this is exactly the time. We've identified weaknesses in the Hive formation that your tactical computers have missed." Vexithai felt his certainty wavering. The humans had been wrong about so many things, yet their unconventional approaches had consistently produced results. What weaknesses? The Hive ships are maintaining perfect formation integrity. Their collective consciousness makes them incredibly coordinated, but it also makes them predictable. They can't adapt quickly to unexpected threats because every ship has to process decisions through the queen ship at the center of the formation. "We're aware of their command structure, Captain. Our weapons are insufficient to penetrate their defenses at this range." "Agreed, sir. But we don't need to destroy the queen ship. We just need to disrupt its control long enough to create chaos." In their formation, Vexithai studied the human captain's face. There was something in Do-hyun's expression that reminded him of their conversation about survival and sacrifice. "What are you proposing?" "A direct assault on the queen ship using nuclear charges. Small teams with manual guidance systems to penetrate their defenses and deliver the weapons directly to their command center." "That's suicide," Vexithai said immediately. "The queen ship is protected by layers of bioarmor and defensive organisms. Nothing could survive that approach." "You're right, Commander, nothing could survive it, but that doesn't mean it can't be done." The words hit Vexithai like a physical blow. Here it was again. That human willingness to embrace certain death, if it served a greater purpose. "Captain, I cannot authorize—" "Commander?" Lieutenant Park Soo-jin's voice cut through the channel. She had moved into view, and behind her Vexithai could see other humans preparing equipment. "We're not asking for authorization. We're informing you of our intentions. You're volunteering for a suicide mission." "We're volunteering to complete the mission, sir," Sergeant Kim Jae-woo said, stepping into view. "The fact that we won't survive, it is secondary." Vexithai looked around the bridge at his own crew. Their exoskeletons had shifted to various shades of blue and green, confusion, disbelief, and fear. The idea of deliberately walking into certain death for a tactical advantage was completely alien to Kalari thinking. "How many of your people are volunteering for this mission?" Vexithai asked. "All of them, Commander," Do-hyun replied simply. "All of them? Every human on this ship has volunteered. We drew lots to see who gets to go." Vexithai's worldview cracked a little more. "You drew lots to see who gets to die. To see who gets the honor of completing the mission, sir." On the tactical display, the Hive fleet continued its approach. They had perhaps 6 hours before the bioships would be in weapons range. Standard Kalari doctrine called for a fighting retreat, attempting to inflict maximum casualties while preserving as much of the fleet as possible. It was a sound strategy that would likely result in saving 60% of their forces, but it would also mean abandoning this entire star system to the Hive. "Show me your plan," Vexithai said quietly. For the next 2 hours, Vexithai watched the humans prepare for their mission with a mixture of awe and terror. They modified their transport ships, removing all safety systems and life support beyond the minimum needed to reach their target. They jury-rigged nuclear warheads with manual detonation systems, eliminating any chance of survival for the operators. What disturbed him most was their attitude. They weren't grim, or heroic, or desperate. They were calm, focused, and occasionally laughed at jokes Vexithai couldn't understand. They were treating certain death like just another job to be done. Commander Nam Yu-jin, one of the younger human officers, approached him as the final preparations were being made. "Commander Vexithai, I wanted to thank you for accepting our unit into your fleet. Commander Nam, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. Nam Yujin smiled, and Vexthai saw something in that expression that chilled him to his core. It wasn't madness or desperation. It was peace. Sir, this is what we do. This is what humans have always done. We find the thing that needs to be done, and we do it, even if it costs everything. Especially then, Commander. That's when it matters most. As the human volunteers boarded their modified ships, Vexthai realized he was witnessing something that no Kalari had ever seen. A species that had made peace with its own extinction, not because they welcomed death, but because they had learned that some things were more important than individual survival. The human ships launched toward the Hive fleet, carrying their nuclear charges and their willing martyrs. Vexthai watched the tactical display as the small human vessels disappeared into the massive bioformation, heading for the Queen ship at its heart. He found himself hoping that he would never have to understand the kind of courage that made such sacrifice seem natural. But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps this was what it really meant to be undefeatable. Not being the strongest, but being willing to pay any price to ensure your enemy couldn't win. The nuclear detonations lit up the tactical display like new stars being born. Vexthai watched in stunned silence as the explosions tore through the heart of the Hive fleet. The Queen ship, a massive bioconstruct that had coordinated the destruction of entire civilizations, began breaking apart in brilliant flashes of atomic fire. Direct hits on the primary command vessel, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. Multiple secondary detonations throughout the fleet formation. The collective consciousness network it's collapsing. On the display, the perfectly coordinated Hive fleet dissolved into chaos. Ships that had moved as one mind suddenly began firing on each other, their navigation systems confused, their tactical coordination destroyed. Some bioships simply stopped moving entirely, their crews apparently unable to function without guidance from the Queen. Casualty report, Vexthai ordered, though he already knew the answer. All human assault teams lost, Commander. No survivors. 73 humans had died in the attack. Captain Lee Do-yun, who had shown him the true meaning of calculated sacrifice. Sergeant Kim Jae-woo, who had questioned the infallibility of tactical computers. Lieutenant Park Soo-jin, who had tried to explain the difference between winning and surviving. Commander Nam Yujin, who had thanked him for the privilege of dying for strangers, all of them gone in nuclear fire, along with dozens of others whose names Vexthai had never learned but who had walked into certain death as calmly as if they were reporting for routine duty. Sir, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the surviving human forces. Put it through. The face that appeared on screen was Captain Park Soo-jin, not the lieutenant he remembered, but her older sister who had been serving on one of the other human ships. Her expression was as calm and professional as her sister's had been. Commander. Vexthai. Captain Park Minji assuming command of remaining human forces. Request permission to begin recovery operations. Captain Park. Vexthai began, then stopped. What could he say? That he was sorry for her loss? That the sacrifice had been noble? That it had been necessary? All of those things were true, but they seemed inadequate. The mission was successful, Commander. Park Minji continued. Hive fleet coordination is broken. Recommend immediate attack on confused enemy formations while they remain disorganized. Vexthai stared at her. Her sister had died less than an hour ago, along with 72 other humans, and she was calmly discussing tactical recommendations. Captain, perhaps we should allow time to... Commander? Park Minji interrupted gently. Time is a luxury we can't afford. The Hive will adapt and re-establish coordination within 6 hours. We need to press our advantage now. She was right. Of course, the scattered Hive ships were vulnerable, but only temporarily. This was the moment to strike while the enemy was blind and confused. All ships, Vexthai ordered, implement attack formation Delta 4. Target the disorganized bioships. Weapons free. The Kalari fleet moved forward with elegant precision, their energy weapons carving through hive ships that no longer moved, in coordinated patterns. It was a slaughter, but a necessary one. Ships that had seemed invincible hours earlier now drifted helplessly, their crews unable to function without their collective consciousness network. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, the hive fleet that had destroyed 17 star systems was scattered debris floating in space. In the aftermath, Vextai walked through the corridors of the Nexus Blade, observing the surviving humans as they went about their duties. They maintained equipment, processed casualty reports, and prepared for the next mission with the same calm efficiency they had always shown. He found Corporal Choi Minji in the armory, checking weapons that had belonged to the dead. She looked up as he approached, showing no signs of grief or trauma. "Corporal," Vextai said carefully, "how are your people handling the losses?" "We're managing, sir. It was a successful mission. The casualties were within acceptable parameters." "Acceptable parameters?" Vextai's exoskeleton shifted to an incredulous orange. 73 of your comrades died." "Yes, sir. And their deaths saved millions of lives across multiple star systems. That's an acceptable trade." Vextai studied her calm face, looking for some sign of the emotion he expected. "Don't you mourn your dead?" "Of course we do, Commander, but we mourn them by continuing the mission they died for. Grief is a luxury for after the war is won." That night, alone in his quarters, Vextai composed his final report to the Kalari High Council. It took him several hours to find the right words. "The human auxiliary forces have proven effective beyond all projections," he wrote. "Their unconventional tactics and willingness to accept casualties have resulted in a decisive victory against previously insurmountable odds." He paused, staring at the words on his screen. They were true, but they didn't capture what he had really learned. "However," he continued, "I must strongly recommend that humanity never be considered as anything other than an ally to the Confederation. Their capacity for organized, calculated violence exceeds any threat we have previously encountered. They do not fight to win battles. They fight to ensure their enemies cannot survive to fight again." He deleted the last paragraph and rewrote it several times before settling on simpler language. "Recommend continued alliance with human forces. They are effective." A week later, Vextai stood in the observation lounge where he had first spoken with Captain Lee Do-yun. The human ships were preparing to depart for their next assignment, another war zone where their particular skills were needed. Captain Park Minji found him there, looking out at the stars. "Commander," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for working with our forces. I know we're different from what you're used to." Vextai looked down at the small human officer. In the past month, he had learned that humans were capable of casual, methodical violence that made even the hive swarm seem predictable. They were a species that had weaponized their own willingness to die, turning sacrifice into a tactical advantage. "Captain," he said finally, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, sir." "Are all human worlds like Earth? All of you the same?" Park Minji smiled, and Vextai saw something in her expression that reminded him of her sister. "Oh no, Commander. Earth is actually one of our more peaceful worlds. You should meet the colonists from the outer systems sometime. They're much more—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Direct in their approach to problems." After the humans left, Vextai returned to his quarters and added one final line to his report. "Under no circumstances should the Confederation ever find itself at war with humanity. We would not survive the experience." He sealed the report with the highest security classification available and sent it to the High Council, knowing that most of them would dismiss his warnings as the nervous overreaction of an aging commander. But, late at night when he couldn't sleep, Vextai found himself grateful that those calm, polite, utterly ruthless humans were fighting beside him rather than against him. It was, he reflected, the only reason any of them were still alive.